Hello, my friends. It's been a while since I've made these talks, and I apologize for that. I've been working on vasculitis. When I first gave these to medical students, I had 80 minutes to present the full material. However, vasculitis is a very broad topic. There's lots of different vasculitis conditions, so I have taken that and I've divided it into several talks. The first talk that I'll give today is actually the introductory talk. It's important to watch this even if you don't watch every talk, because this is an introduction that prepares you for subsequent talks. So even if you're going to pick and choose which of the vasculitis conditions you want to hear about, it's important to hear the introduction. As I've noted before, advertisements are being placed on my talks. I have no knowledge of which advertisements are placed. I'm not reimbursed for those, so go ahead and listen to them. I know that they pay for YouTube. However, again, recognize that I don't necessarily endorse any of the products which are being shown. I did want to make a little comment about my notes, my lecture notes and reference list. You probably will notice that there's several references that are used over and over again. Up to Date is an online textbook that I very much like. It is updated regularly, it's easy to use, and when seeing patients, I can actually look up information in real time while I'm talking to the patient. In a way, this is an advertisement. However, I'm not being reimbursed for it. The subscriptions are pricey. Unless you're a physician, they're probably not worth it. They're about $600 a year. At institutions and medical centers, a lot of times that's part of your job, is they'll pay for your subscription for Up to Date. I also list several other references, including references from Arthritis and Rheumatism, or Arthritis and Rheumatology, New England Journal of Medicine, and then a smattering of references as I find them. I do like to look up the source of some of the things that I say, maybe not everything, but at least the ultimate source of some of the things you say, so there is sort of a long reference list. Again, there are lectures in other topics other than vasculitis in the field of rheumatology, and I encourage you to look those up. Thank you for listening to my lectures, and off we go. Let's begin our discussion today of vasculitis. Arteritis refers to inflammation in the blood vessel wall when it's in the arteries only. By definition, vasculitis is inflammation of the blood vessel wall. This can lead to damage, such as inflammation and necrosis of the blood vessel wall with impairment of blood flow. Destruction of the blood vessel wall can lead to perforation and hemorrhage of blood into adjacent tissue. Endothelial damage of the blood vessel can actually lead to thrombosis or clots in the blood vessel, and thus distal tissue ischemia or infarction, and even tissue death, which can lead to end organ damage or can lead to the death of the individual. So they're dangerous. They can progress rapidly and lead to damage and death. With respect to what's the cause of them, there are many vasculitis conditions which are due to infectious causes, such as rickettsia can cause Rocky Mountain spotted fever, syphilis or aspergillus can cause infection of the aorta, but there's a whole host of non-infectious causes whose etiology is really not known, and that's the purpose of our discussion today. As I mentioned, pathologically what these are is inflammation of the blood vessel wall, and the way these lead to damage again is extravasation, blood leaking out of the blood vessel into the surrounding tissue, or distal tissue ischemia and infarction. Generally, one or two of these will cause damage in all the vasculitis conditions we are going to discuss. There are many conditions that are called vasculitis. The Chapel Hill Consensus Conference sought to put some order to this. Basically, with respect to classification of the various vasculitis conditions, they divided the diseases up based on vessel size, such as large vessel, medium vessel, or small vessel. Large vessels being the vessels such as the aorta or the subclavian arteries, femoral arteries. Medium vessels are the vessels that end up in the organs. This is just an example of renal arteries and veins. And then, of course, the small vessels are the end vessels, the arterioles, capillaries, venules. And this is what they came up with. The large vessel vasculitis includes a couple of conditions, include Takayasu's arteritis and giant cell arteritis. Medium vessel vasculitis includes polyarteritis nodosum and Kawasaki's disease. And then with respect to the small vessel vasculitis, the presence or the absence of a anti-neutrophil cytoplasmic antibody was important. The ones where the antinuclear cytoplasmic antibody or ANCA was not present are the immune complex small vessel vasculitis conditions, including IgA vasculitis, cryoglobulonemic vasculitis, and then the ANCA-associated vasculitis conditions are things such as granulomatosis with polyarteritis or Wagner's disease. This is a representation of those vasculitis in tabular form. And I plan on working down through this list, at least getting several of these, including the large vessel vasculitis, the medium vessel vasculitis, and the small vessel vasculitis, both ANCA associated and immune complex associated. We also will talk a smattering of these other vasculitis conditions listed below. These will all be done in separate lectures. I next want to give some caveats with respect to the vasculitis conditions. A lot of these will make more sense after you study each of the vasculitis conditions that I've outlined. However, I just want to put it all together in the introduction. Again, as I mentioned, I do think the introduction will be important as a baseline for review with respect to any of the other vasculitis. Number one, these are systemic diseases. They involve lots of different organs and different systems of the body. So it's important that the patient have a complete history and physical examination. One needs to seek out each organ that's involved. In addition to the history and physical, the labs can help. For example, the urinalysis can show if there's any clues of kidney involvement. And of course, the chest x-ray can show if there's any concerns of things such as lung involvement. I think a routine set of labs is important, including blood counts and chemistries, looking for clues of other disease, and also the acute phase reactants, looking for clues of inflammation, such as sedimentation rate and the C-reactive protein. The specialty labs that are obtained include the serum complements, C3, C4, and the CH50. When there's active vasculitis, a lot of times there's consumption of the complements and depression of the complements. C1q is looked at to see if there's clues of immune complexes. These diseases oftentimes can look like lupus, so the anti-nuclear antibody is helpful, and also the anti-neutrophil cytoplasmic antibody, or ANCA, which we talked about is important in the classification of the types of vasculitis. Cryoglobulinemia can look like vasculitis, so cryoglobulins need to be checked. Hepatitis B, surface antigen, hepatitis C, and HIV are looked for because these diseases can cause a type of vasculitis. And then depending on the history, drug screens, tests for syphilis, Lyme, rickettsia, coagulation studies, blood cultures, and echocardiogram. Angiography can look at the vessels and give you clues and findings of vasculitis, but most importantly, I think biopsy, which is the gold standard. A lot of times I'm asked on cases where there's a lot of different systems involved, and reflexively some physicians will go ahead and label these vasculitis, but I think it's important to prove that there's a vasculitis and get the tissue. In certain diseases such as giant cell arteritis, temporal artery biopsy is very important. With respect to the ANCA-associated diseases, lung or kidney biopsy is important. In central nervous system vasculitis, just an angiogram can sometimes be deceiving with respect to diseases. The CNS vasculitis, so brain or leptomeningeal biopsy is suggested. Skin leukocytoclastic vasculitis is evaluated, and then with respect to polyarteritis nodosum, sural nerve or testicular biopsy. The differential diagnosis involves diseases that can cause multisystem looking disease and also can cause tissue infarction. And so we look for systemic lupus, Atherembolic disease, obviously, as there would be tissue thrown out causing clots in the peripheral vessels. Atrial myxoma can cause that type of disease. Atrial myxoma is a cancer of the cardiac wall, which can throw out little emboli, which can block blood vessels. Bacterial endocarditis, inflammation of the heart valves can throw out little emboli. And then the thrombotic disorders, where there's distal coagulation of the blood, such as cardiolipin antibody syndrome or thrombotic thrombocytopenic purpura. Some of the drugs, such as cocaine and amphetamine, can cause a vasculitis-looking disease. And then we talked about how certain infections are associated with a vasculitis type disease, such as syphilis, Lyme disease, etc. Rickettsia, again, infection. Malignancies can sometimes look like vasculitis. Sarcoidosis, when we discussed that in the past, we talked about how there can be lung and kidney involvement, and then, of course, keep your eyes open for other things. Now, the classic treatments of these conditions primarily involve the use of corticosteroids with some sort of an immunosuppressive agent or drug. And a lot of these medicines, I'm sure, will look so familiar to you if you've seen any of the other lectures about the rheumatologic diseases. So things like cyclophosphamide, which is actually a chemotherapeutic drug, the one that can cause a lot of problems such as hair loss, vomiting and stuff is used. Methotrexate and azathioprine, which are milder chemotherapeutics, are frequently used, and you may have remembered us discussing that in the treatment of rheumatoid arthritis. Mycophenolate mofetil, which was an anti-transplant drug we use in lupus, and again, we use in the vasculitis conditions. IL-6 blockers such as abatacept or TNF-alpha blockers such as infliximab, and then the rituximab. So these medicines all look very familiar if you've been following along with respect to the rheumatologic diseases. In future talks, I will discuss the use of these medicines specifically. So this is the end of our discussion, introduction to vasculitis. It's very superficial and brief. Again, I think this is a useful base as we then move forward into the specific vasculitis conditions. Thank you for listening to my lecture today on the introduction to vasculitis or vasculitis and introduction. The next thing that I will discuss will be large vessel vasculitis, which includes giant cell arteritis and Takayasu syndrome, and we will work through several of the vasculitis syndromes which I did outline in this talk. Again, thank you, and I look forward to seeing you again.